I'm Dr. Catherine Miles, and together with Dr. Mustafa Youssef and Dr. Abdullah Shadifat, we researched Jordanian doctors' training needs for breaking bad news. Breaking bad news to patients can be considered one of the most complex and difficult communication tasks that a doctor has to undertake. There are a number of models for training doctors in the communication strategies and skills for breaking bad news, and two commonly used frameworks are the Cadbury-Cambridge framework and the Spikes framework, which are developed from a Western perspective. A less widely known framework is the IGAD framework, a theoretical breaking bad news framework suggested by two Jordanian doctors. In our context of Jordan, there is a lack of empirical research detailing doctors' experiences of breaking bad news and their training needs. Therefore, this research aimed to explore doctors' experience and perspectives of breaking bad news to patients, to discover the relevance and applicability of skills from different breaking bad news models to the Jordanian Arab context, and to consider the implications for medical education in Jordan and beyond, where there may be similar demographics and cultural considerations as Jordan. A cross-sectional survey design was used to address the aims, and a questionnaire was developed from the literature to gather both quantitative and qualitative data. It was contents and sequence validated and pilot tested, then distributed to all doctors in two large Amman hospitals, resulting in a convenient sample of 161 doctors with a total response rate of 32%. Breaking bad news was a fairly common occurrence, with almost a third of doctors giving bad news weekly and just over a third giving bad news monthly. In terms of specific breaking bad news training, only a third of doctors had received training in breaking bad news, and the most common time to be trained was during practice, and lectures was the most common form. But 55% of the total doctors thought that a workshop would be the most beneficial type of training, even though this was not commonly experienced. Of the trained doctors that reported their satisfaction, just over a third of doctors were satisfied or very satisfied with training, but 2/3 were ambivalent or dissatisfied with their training. In terms of doctors' reported confidence in breaking bad news, 14% were unconfident or very unconfident, 40% were neutral, and just over 45% were confident or very confident at breaking bad news. Using chi-square testing, it was found that there was no significant effect of training on confidence at breaking bad news. Many challenges face doctors when breaking bad news, and the main challenge chosen by 64% of doctors was that relatives do not want the patient to know the diagnosis. This was followed by the challenge of lack of privacy. Another challenge identified from free text was managing a verbally or physically aggressive response of patients or relatives to the news. Example quotations from doctors about this need include to protect myself against possible violence when giving bad news, and after CPR, relatives don't accept the news if it failed and they start fighting and broke everything down. We investigated the perceived need for further training in 14 specific communication strategies from breaking bad news models. This graph shows doctors' level of interest for training in the skills listed on the left-hand side of the screen. For all suggested skills, the percentage of doctors that were interested or very interested in training was higher than the percentage of doctors that were uninterested or very uninterested. The skill with the highest percentage of interest was answering difficult questions, followed by checking patients' understanding and using religious phrases appropriately. This research shows the need to develop breaking bad news curricula that are interactive and repeat through all training stages from undergraduate to practice, with increasing complexity to develop and build skills. For the content of breaking bad news curricula, there is a need to incorporate both skills and procedural elements that are relevant to the local cultural context. Simply transferring a Western model to the Middle Eastern context may be limiting. Our findings show that communication skills identified in Western frameworks can be augmented when combined with elements from, for example, the Jordanian IGAD framework. This research also identified training needs such as managing angry responses of patients that are not included in any current frameworks. So a tailor-made breaking bad news curricula is essential for each context to increase doctors' knowledge, competence, and confidence in breaking bad news. These are the references. Thank you so much.